Welcome to Yerushalmi, Bava Kama, Daf Lamed Daled, with about a Mishnah, Halacha Gimel. Zogt, the Heilige Mishnah, goes my Nistak. If he steals my and we'll see, Alpi Pashas means crack, we'll see in the Gemara, or Paris, let's say they're keeping they rotted, Yain Vehichmitz. In all these cases, Misham Kshas said, because this is, according to Pshat, I don't know, I'll go with it. It's a Dabra Nicker. As you can see, obviously, you see the damage. However, Ma'bev Nifsal, you have a Ma'beya that it was Nifsal. Now, Nifsal means it's gone out of circulation, or it's not used anymore. Or Truma v'nitmes, Chametz v'avalo Pesach, or Behema v'nevda v'aveira, either bestiality or it was worshipped. Otherwise, or became possible as or it was going out now to be stoned, in which case it's worthless. Because again, the damage over here is not physical damage, not detectable. So therefore, here's your animal. Looks exactly the same as it did before. Nistak here doesn't mean literally cracked. It means that pasalte malchus, that the government, or the federal government, no longer uses it, as opposed to a case where locally people decided for whatever reason not to use it, sort of like the $2 bill that never took off. Shmuel on Mishanistak Vape. No, Shmuel says talking about the literal crack. That's what the Mishnah is talking about. Okay. So it comes up by the Rav, who says Bishop Asalte Malchus, Nistak is not necessarily a visible, it's obviously not a visible crack. And the difference, by the way, would be, if it's the local people decide not to use it, it's still valid, and therefore I'm a but it's Basalte Malchus, Rav holds, since you can't use it anywhere, right? The United States government says, let's say no more $2 bills, so now your $2 bill is worthless. So if that's the case, then it's the Misham Kshas Hagzela. That's what Rav is saying here. Okay, so let's see again. Shmuel of Mishnah Stik Vade. Talking about weight crack. Now switching suddenly to Paris. If the Paris rotted from Kinima, in other words, when it says in the Reish of the Mishnah Paris for Kivu, and it's Misham Kshas Hagzela, it's talking about where it was infested by these Kinima, and which means the whole crop, that whole batch of Paris is all ruined, and therefore it's Mishalem Shas Exela. Then Kabrina, if it's just local damage, it's just like a worm, so then it's Oimeloy Areshal Lefanecha. I'm assuming, I guess, that small amount of damage, either it's vital, it's almost not noticeable, or you just pay for that little bit of damage. Fine. Because that won't ruin the whole telas, I guess the Gemara is saying here, that won't ruin the whole crop, or that whole batch of pears. Rav Huna Amar Bishop Pasalte Malchus. Now going back to what we said before, Bishop Pasalte Malchus, Pasalte Medina, if it's just locally in the state they decide not to use it, because it's usable somewhere, they'll go to a different state and use it over there. Shmuel Amar Filu Pasalte Malchus again. So Shmuel, like we said in the Mishnah, Shmuel is going to sheet that if the damage is invisible, then so Pasalte Malchus, the damage is not visible. The coin is the same; they're just not used anymore. Rabbi Yudin, they didn't make to the Medrash one day. Come Imre Monasi meets Reb Mon. Amalei no ma chidus. He said chidus like a Litvak. He said chidus. What chidus? Have a look on the Medrash yom midday. What chidus did you say today in this Medrash? Amalei Mila plan. We said over this thing with Shmuel, where he says Pasalti Machos. Amalei Reshel Vanecha. Amalei Vlad Masnita. He we like what's the big chiddush? I asked you for a chiddush. You told me something we've seen in the Mishnah. Truma v'nitmes. Truma v'nitmes is also where the truma the truma looks exactly the same, except there's some kind of tumah. There's some kind of spiritual issue here, but it looks exactly the same. So I already know this. That pasalte malchus. Amalei tipot b'shnitmes me'eleha. Now, the reason the Mishnah had to tell you two cases, and the Chiddush of the Beis Medrash was that was puzzle where it became Tomei Me'eleh. In other words, it was sitting there, and it became Tomei on its own. In other words, he wasn't shomer. So it's a hesach hadas became tamei. Mashen came the case with basalte machos that's they actively passed the coin, and that's the chiddush. And still oimer loy hareshul. I'm sorry, still, and he has to pay. I'm sorry that oimer loy hareshul chol even though it was done be a dime. Chilfei amanish beloy koydma pesach. What happens if you have a case where guys swore before Pesach on a piece of chametz that belonged to somebody else, and turns out he lied. So acha pesach misham loy chametz yafa. We said yesterday that by chametz usually you could tell him even though it's useless because it's cham shel pesach, you can still say mishlo fanecha, but not by shvua, because by shvua there's a chiyuv to pay back the chayfetz. You can't give him back a chayfetz that's worthless is by definition not the chayfetz, and therefore you have to give him back actual chametz. Amar Ramona azas lekisrin v'ashkoch Reb Chizki the dorsh le mishun Reb Yaakov ba'acha. Right, this that we just said from Chilfi, and I said in Isbar Nosh Polgal Chilfi Shem Mishal Mechametz Yafa. Hakol Moed Mechametz Shem Mishal Mechametz Yafa. In other words, what's the chiddush? Nobody would argue in such a halacha, and everybody would agree that in the case of shvu, you have to pay back real chametz. You can't give them back the chametz shovel of a pesach. It was But Dr. the Mishnah Nasan lo umnim l'sakein, so you give his suit to the cleaners, we kill and they ruin the suit. Chayav l'sham, the cleaners has to pay for it. Nasan l'chorish, sheda tevel migdal l'sakein, he gives a carpenter sheda tevel migdal, a box, a chest, fix it, v'kilko, again, chayav l'shalom. Abanoi contractor, should keep all of us a koisel l'sosre, he got himself a demolition job, knocked down a wall. But it was always meant to take apart the wall. But Sheba, instead of Savonim, he broke the bricks, or Shehizik, or Shezikon, or damaged the bricks in some way. Chayv l'sham, he has to pay. So he's demoing the wall. V'nafel mitzad achar, and it falls down the other side. Pater. However, v'machmas hamaka, if it was from the blow of the wrecking ball, then chayv, he should have been more careful. So Ravuna says. What kind of case are we talking about over here? Because normally the uman is kind of a shvach kli. So why are we saying over here that they have to pay? Why didn't we say that the uman is kind of a shvach kli? So it says talking about he did it. In other words, the kli is exactly the way it was before. Something came loose, so he knocked it in with a nail. But the etzem kli is exactly the same. Therefore, he's not kainit b'shvach kli, and therefore, like we said in the Mishnah, that that they have to pay. Right. Again, if a woman is kind of shvach kli, who would be parted from paying is kind of the kli. It adheres to pay for the kli. Right. Sagt der Mishnah. Nasan Samuel Tzeva, he gave wool to a dye of Ikticha Hayoda, and it got burnt in the vat. No slow demand is to pay him for the wool. Tzaviko, if he used, let's say, the inferior or previously used dyeing materials, so he used an inferior, so it's an inferior quality of dye. Imashvech yes, it's so it's yodel ala tachtainu. In this case, so you give him the lesser of the two values. So that one value is how much did he spend dyeing it, and the other value is what's the profit, how much more is it worth now? Whichever is the lower number, that's what he pays the one. Let's say he told him, please dye it red. Shachar instead, or Shachar he has to pay him for the wool. Again, Yehuda says this is right because he's kainit. Reb Meir says, so all he has to do is pay him for the wool. Yehuda says no. Rabbi Yehuda says again, Im hashvach yesel yitzir nos nesiv, Im tzir yisrael shvach nos nos shvach. So the Gemara nos and seven letzava. Rav Huna Amar sheikdicha samimoni. That in the Mishnah when it says V'ikdicha yoru nos ledemet simra, it actually is doesn't mean ikdicha yoru, it means dicha samimonim. Then it's nice and like demet simra. But if it's ikdicha yoru, it's oimeloi reishal chofanechot. The Rafulda says. And that's because it's apparently was not in his control, and there's nothing he can do about it. Right, so that's how. Like Ticha Yoda, Amalei Vishal Chofanecha. Fine. Shmuel Ama Afilu Ikticha Samamonim, Amalei Vishal Chofanecha. Shmuel says no. Afilu Ikticha Samamonim is it's Hareshal Cho Lifonecha. Now Afilu obviously is a problematic word over here. Well, what's this? What is that Afilu over here? Right. So the Rafulda says that what Shmuel is saying is that you don't have, right. You Rav Huna hold that Hikticha Yoira is Amlo Reshel Chofanecha, and I'm telling you Hikticha Simonim is also Reshel Chofanecha. In other words, so you don't have a case for the Mishnah. I have a case for the Mishnah of Shmuel because Hikticha Yoira is not the Beit Simrei. But you say Ikticha Yori is Oimlo Shulchanecha by Samamonim. I'm telling you, I have news for you that Allah is also a Shulchanecha, and therefore you have nothing to talk to Mishman. That's Afilu. As an Afilu Ikticha Samamonim, it's Oimlo Shulchanecha, and therefore you have no case in the Mishnah. Mahu. Now, as Tigmar, let's give some examples. Mahu mashvach yesal etzah. What does that mean exactly? So Zuk Tigmar Barnosh. There was a person. The Yav lechavre chamisha money amer. He gave him 5 money worth of wool. V'chamisha money and 5 money worth of samamon. V'asar money agre. And he said, "I'll pay you 10 money as your wage." And Amalei said to him, "Listen, tzave somak, and I want you to dye red." But what happened? It's akas ukum, and instead he made it black. So Amalei, so the Balbai says to the worker, "Listen, ilutzavate sumak, had you made it red like I asked you to, avatav from chamisha money, be worth 25 money. Vikada tzavate ukum, but now since you made it black, less utav esrim money, it's only worth 20 money, and therefore." Atavati dos. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. You lose. You're going to lose from me, but I know you're going to lose. You'll end up being the loser, and I know I don't want to lose mine. So therefore, what I'm going to do is I'm going to only pay you 15. Therefore, so it comes out I was supposed to make 5, but because of the way you did your job, it's only worth 20. So therefore, I want to keep 5, and I'm only paying you 15. Amr Rabyonin, a similar vein, Vatishma Mino by Nosh. Also, a similar case you can see from here. The Yov Lechavre Shmona din, he gave him 8 din, and he said, "Listen, there's only chit mitfei. I want you to buy me 8 din worth of Chitin and Tveria." V'Zavla, instead, this guy went, and he went V'Zavla Mitzipar and bought it from Tzipar. Amalei. So the Balabais said to him, "Listen, Ilus Vantali Mitferia, had you bought me, like I asked you to, buy wheat from Tveria, for what would you have gotten for 8 din? You would have gotten have an Esma Chamisha Mudoi. There would have been 25 Mudoi. Now, Kedon desavant mitzipara, since you went to Tzipara with my 8 dinrin, less nala esrim madoya. It's more expensive, and therefore you only got 20 madoya. So therefore, atavadet didach, I know over the dis. What I'm going to do is I'm going to deduct the difference to you. So in other words, I don't want to lose any money over here. So therefore, I'm going to deduct 5 from you. So I get to keep. Depends according to which pshat you're going to go to, but the bottom line is either according to Rafuldo or the more simple pshat, I think more straightforward pshat, is with the Pnei Moshe pshat, and I think that the bottom line is, and I don't want to end up with a loss over here, so I'm going to deduct from you whatever the value of those 5 extra moedoya of measures of chitna I would have gotten had you bought it in fair like I asked you to. I'm going to deduct that from you. Have a wonderful evening.